All right, good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know a lot of people will join us throughout the presentation. And then, of course, we have a lot of parents that watch us after the fact. So, again, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, you can hear me. I'm Tiffany Weaver, if we have not met, the principal at Mason Creek. I've got my three amazing assistant principals with me as well. So, they will be kind of following along in the chat and answering any questions that you may have as I go through our presentation tonight. So this is one of our meetings that I really like to have with parents because I think it's important for you guys as parents to know not only a little bit about safety and discipline, which was our topic last month, but about how is the school doing as a whole. So I coined this phrase a few years ago and call it State of Mason Creek, similar to like State of the Union address. But really, I'm going to be going through our scores from last school year, and those were generated from the state. So most parents know that as GMAS or milestones, and then talk about how we plan on improving on those scores this school year. So I'm going to start by showing you first the data, and I'll talk about each grade level and subject. And I always like to put this because right now the state has released GMAS scores, but it has all of our students. So if you had a student that enrolled the week before GMAS or the week of GMAS, because that happened too, your student took those milestones last year. And so they don't necessarily end up counting for Mason Creek because they didn't attend Mason Creek long enough. But at this point in time, all of those students are in our in the data that I'm going to show you. I also am going to show you a couple different things. And so on each slide, you're going to see two graphs like this. So it's going to have four colors, and those represent the four levels that students can earn or score at when they take GMAS. So for math and language arts for 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then in 8th grade, they get the joy of taking science and social studies. So they have four different subjects in 8th grade. And so the first level is going to be featured in this peach color. And this is directly screenshots from the dashboard that the state puts out. So if you just Google GMAS or Georgia Milestones dashboard, you're going to get a website that you can look up any school district in the state of Georgia and see how they did on GMAS. And so this is the chart that you're going to see. So the top chart will be Mason Creek Middle. The bottom chart will be the state of Georgia. And so the level one, the peach color, is a beginning learner. And what I like to say with a beginning learner, you really struggled, didn't learn a lot of the standards, and you're going to definitely struggle if you move up to the next grade level. Now, we also know that we have students that don't take their whole time, they don't put the effort in, or we do have students that get test anxiety and they just are not great test takers. So that could be also an indicator if they scored in that level one area. A level two is going to be that yellow color. It's the next one on the graph, and that is going to be a developing learner. And basically that you learned some of the standards for that course, but not all of them. And so that also indicates that you're going to struggle moving up. A green color is going to be level three, proficient. And that's where we want all of our students to be at least a proficient learner. And then finally, the fourth, level four, is the highest level. It's distinguished learner. And that means that your student not only mastered all of those standards, but really they mastered them at the highest level possible. And so you're going to see we have students in each of the four levels. Now, the state, when they give our calculations, they do give schools credits for being a level 2, 3, and a 4. And so you're going to see kind of how that goes in transition. So I'll just start so you can get an example. So we're going to start with math. This is 6th grade math, again, last school year. You can see that Mason Creek is the top bar and the state of Georgia is the bottom bar. And so we had less level one students. So if you see, we want more students on the right side of the graph and less on the left side. So you can see we had less students in the level one category. We had a little bit more students in the level two category, but then we had more in level three. So you can kind of get an idea of how this is going to look, but each slide will look similar to this. And again, if you have questions as I'm going through this, please drop them in the chat, write them down. I'll definitely take questions at the end, but the APs are following along to answer your questions. So again, this is 6th grade math. Moving to 7th grade math, we had even less students that scored in that level 1 category. We have a bigger chunk of students, though, that did score in a level 2. But just as before, we have more students at the proficient level than the state does. So that is 7th grade math. I don't want to move too fast. I know some of you want to see the actual numbers. So please, if I'm moving too fast, you can raise your hand, drop it in the chat, and I can always go back. All right, 8th grade math. I love pointing out that we only had 15% of our students that scored a level 1. So if you think back to 6th grade math and 7th grade math, we had a significantly higher group. So we like to say at Mason Creek, by the time you leave us, you are more prepared than when you started us. So we work really hard to grow our students. So just because you may not be a level 3 student or a level 4 student, we're really working hard to get you out of that level 1 category and ready for the next grade level. We also had more students scoring at level 3 and 4 than the state. So 8th grade math did a great job last year. Move into language arts, so same layout as you just saw with math. In 6th grade language arts, our students did struggle, and you're going to see that we have some action steps in just a moment to show how we are going to improve those scores this year. So that's 6th grade language arts. Here's 7th grade language arts. And again, if you think back about math, how many students we had at level 1, we have more level 1 students than we do in math in our language arts categories. But in this one, you can see that we did do better than the state in 7th grade language arts. We have more 3s and 4s featured in the green and the blue. All right, and then finally 8th grade. You can see we have slightly higher level 4s than the state, but then slightly lower. It's kind of hard to see. It's a 26% at our in our green and then 28 in theirs. And so we have identified some areas, like I said, for language arts that you're going to see in just a moment. Okay, and like I said, 8th grade gets to take science and social studies. And so students don't take science in 6th and 7th. They took it in 5th, but this is the first time they've taken it in a couple years. So in 8th grade science, you can see that we do significantly better than the state. This is one of our areas that we do really well in at Mason Creek. Historically, for years, we've done very well. So you can see I'm definitely not a math teacher, but it's 49% of our students are 3s and 4s, which you can see the state is only 28%. So again, our students are definitely mastering the science standards in the 8th grade. Move into 8th grade social studies. So 8th grade is the very first state test that students have to take. They no longer take any in elementary school. And so 8th grade, if you're not familiar, is Georgia studies. So it is basically from the time Georgia was created way back when till now. And so it is a lot of information to cover in one school year. And you can definitely see that our students did around the same as the state, but definitely not where we want to be. We have a very large group of students scoring at the level 2, and we have a great plan for those students to do better this school year. We also have one, I just wanted to include this too, we have one high school course that has to take an end of course assessment. So if you have high school students, parents, then you would know that they have an end of course. It's not called end of grade anymore. And so we have enhanced algebra, which gives students a high school algebra credit. And so there's not a red bar because we didn't have any students that scored at level 1. We had one student score a level 2, and that student actually made a 523, which means that they were 1 point away from being a 3. But I put a little star around it because we had 89% of our students score a level 4, which is the highest possible level. And we were extremely proud of them and Miss Crow, who teaches our algebra course. So if you have students in algebra this year, just know they're in very good hands with Miss Crow. All right, so that was a lot of information. And again, if you have questions about the data, I definitely can go back to it. But the next part of the presentation is to talk about what are we going to do with that data and what did we do with it. So when we got it in May, we organized a student outcome committee meeting where we planned a school improvement plan. So if you own a business or think about a business, it's kind of like a business plan that a business would have to develop more business or better profits or whatever the business is trying to do. So we do something similar to that in the summertime with our teacher leaders. And so the administrators and we dig into the data. So we look at GMAT scores, we look at iReady, Beacon, we look at surveys, and just look at a variety of things. And we come up with action steps that we believe will help our students do better in the next year. And that would be this year. So we have 8 action steps. So I'm going to go through them and kind of give you an idea of what we have come up with and what we believe will impact our students. So the first one speaks to students that are 2 or more grade levels below based on iReady. So your students took a math and a reading diagnostic assessment in August. If they scored at 2 grade levels below, then you should have gotten contacted. And so we identified this group of students that we wanted to conference with monthly and notify their parents about how they're doing. Of course, there are many parents that say, well, I'd like that information too. And teachers have that readily available. But these are our targeted groups of students. And so they're going to get monthly updates to their parents every time an assessment is taken. They'll notify their parents. They're also going to be telling them how many lessons they're finishing each week in iReady. So that is the first one. So we want to know individual struggling students and make sure their parents know where they're at as well. So again, that's for reading and math. Our second one, and I try to put a little example of it, our students are keeping up with their data as well. So one of the things that we talked about this summer is that students really don't know where they're at. So they might say, well, I have an A in the class, but then they score a level 1 on math. And so we want them to know where they're doing just as much as their teachers and their parents know. So they're completing what we're calling a student data tracker, and it has a lot of information on it. So they have their GMAT scores from last year. They have their Beacon scores already from September of this year. They have their iReady scores from August. They're getting ready to take a common assessment next week, in fact, for science and social studies. And so basically they are keeping up with their own data. So this is an example of one way students can do it. Some of them have printed copies in their binders. Some of them have electronic Google Slides in a Google Classroom. So definitely please ask your students how they're keeping up with their student data tracker, because they should be updating it each time they take an assessment. Ms. Mancy, did you have a question?
Wait. Did it turn off? I don't think it turned off.
Okay. All right. The next one speaks to the teacher. So the third action step that we have is a teacher developing their own data trackers for their students. So instead of let's say a teacher, if I say, hey, Ms. Daniel, how are your students doing? And she says, oh, well, my first period is doing really well. My second period is struggling. We want to really get away from doing that. And we want our teachers to really know your students at a better, deeper level. And so they are keeping up with your students' data as well and kind of tracking their growth. So this is an example. Most of our teachers keep up with it electronically. Some of them do have that old school paper pencil, but this is an example of one of the ones. I think Ms. Cowan made this one. She's a 6th grade math teacher, and they put their students' names in there, and then every time an assessment is taken, they add that data. Many of them have it color-coded, so it shows in green if they've mastered it, or it could be in red if they're struggling. And so this is just a better way for our students to be kept up with individually by their teachers. All right, our fourth action step, remember we have 8 of them. Our fourth one is to have monthly collaborative PLCs. And so parents, a PLC is essentially a planning time for teachers to plan together. It stands for Professional Learning Community. And so they have them weekly already. So if I'm a 6th grade math teacher, I meet every week with my 6th grade math counterparts. But this monthly meeting is for language arts teachers to get with social studies teachers and our math teachers to get with our science teachers and develop a collaborative project, because they really do go hand in hand. So an example of this could be in language arts. They're reading a story about the Great Depression, and social studies is talking about the Great Depression as one of their standards. In 7th grade math and science, I know they did a project where science, they completed the research and they gathered the data, and then in math they entered it onto some type of graph. So they're doing that monthly, because we want our students to see that they're not individual subjects. They really do go hand in hand, and especially with math, having science collaborate with them, it shows students that math does really have some real life good examples of why you have to know how to do math. And so that is, again, action step 4. Our 5th action step, I know your students are on a team, and so the team of teachers that work with each student, they meet monthly as well. Now, honestly, they meet all the time, but this is a dedicated time for them to meet and discuss any student issues. So it could be about behavior, it could be that they're struggling with reading, and they just talk about ideas to help individual students that all have the same teacher. And so again, they meet monthly. They do meet a lot, more frequently in the hallway, but this is a dedicated time. So sometimes you guys will get phone calls from your teachers, and they'll call all together because they're meeting together. And hopefully, parents, you find that is helpful to not get 4 individual phone calls versus 1 phone call. So again, we want to create consistency among those teachers that teach the same students. Our 6th action step, hopefully by now you have heard Circa, and hopefully in a good way, but Circa is our writing strategy at Mason Creek. We do have a platform called Think Circa. This is different than that. So Circa is a writing strategy. And if you think about elementary school, a lot of them use race or races. Circa is similar to that. So each letter stands for a part of the writing. So it's claims, evidence, reasoning, counter argument, and audience. And so we're doing that in all of our content areas. Even PE does Circa. And so this action step just speaks to having the opportunity for teachers to come together and show examples of what that looks like in your content. Because it can be hard to write a Circa in math, but they're doing a great job showing each other how it's working for them. So again, this is just having clear expectations from each grade, each subject, and showing examples. We're almost done, parents. We've got 2 more. So this one speaks to vocabulary. We believe this is a really big area that challenges our students. If they can read all day long, they can read out loud, and you're like, oh, wow, they're great readers. But if they don't know what the words mean, it doesn't help them. So they're not comprehending what they're reading because they don't know the words. And so we're really pushing vocabulary strategies. And so each week during their planning time, teachers sit down, create a list of vocabulary words, and then what strategies they can use to teach students those vocabulary words. So this is a big push for us this year. And then the last one just speaks to rewards. So we would like to reward students a lot. In the past, we've done a lot for attendance, for grades. We do a lunch for all A's and a snack for A's and B's. But this year, we're going to reward students for their growth on iReady. So again, they took it in August. They're going to take it again in January and then again in March. So we're going to reward students based on their growth between the first to second assessment and then the second to the third assessment. And then finally, that's all of our action steps, but we want you guys to know it's not something that we just create in the summer and it's done and it's final and we think, oh, that's great. We actually have something that's called a school improvement plan checkpoint. And we just had one, I think 2 weeks ago. And we sit down and all the teachers, they present for each grade level and subject and talk about if they believe the action steps are working, why or why not, and do we need to change them. So we do make some changes to the action steps if we feel like it's not as effective as we thought it was going to be. And so it's kind of a living document. So anytime you guys have questions, you should ask us, especially if there was something about parents in an action step. If you're like, I've never heard, my student says they don't keep a data tracker. We would like to know that feedback. Of course, we believe that they are, and we talk about that they are, but if your student can't speak to that, then we're not doing a good job with it. So we do review our action steps very frequently, but we do it school-wide 3 times a year, basically every quarter. All right, so I know I talked a whole lot, and that was really fast. So if there are any slides that you want me to go back to as far as data, any specific questions I can answer about the data. I know there was some chatting going on. Are there any questions that I needed to answer? Were y'all able to answer them? Mr. Owens, were y'all good? Okay.
We answered them all. We just didn't have the school code off top of our heads.
I'm going to stop presenting so I can see you guys. School code for which program?
Someone asked for the school code. They just wanted to know what the school code is.
Yes, I think she was referring to a survey.
Oh, for Pulse?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. You know what? It's probably a great time of year for me to add that to Friday's newsletter. So I will add it. Thank you for whoever asked that for reminding me. Just made myself a note. Any other questions, comments, feedback for us? Well, the recording of this will be on the newsletter on Friday. And so, like I said, I know I went very fast. And when you watch the recording, it will be on YouTube. So you can always pause it and look at the data in more detail. So if you have any questions after you look at it, please reach out. I know I tried to put it in very parent-friendly terms because we have a lot of acronyms and a lot of things that we say every day, and it makes sense to us, but it might not make sense to you guys. So please let us know if it's ever confusing so we can make it better for y'all. All right. Well, if y'all don't have any questions, I can tell you later this month we'll be doing another workshop. It's going to be related to technology, and a lot of it is AI related. So I will put out the date in the next week or so for that. So if you have questions about AI in advance, let me know, and I'll be working on that presentation for y'all. All right. Well, have a good night, everyone.
All right. Good night. Thanks.